If you could teach the world one thing about your country, what would it be? In Brazil, we speak Portuguese PTBR, not Spanish. I learned that in 90 Day Fiancé. I would add that a lot of Brazil is not like the videos you see on the internet. I live in Minas Gerais, not BH, and it's a culturally rich area with wonderful people. The food is so good. I've never witnessed or been a victim of violence or crime. Social relationships are very important. Children are considered valuable and wanted members of society. Yeah, the infrastructure needs a lot of work, but that can be said of most once colonized countries. It's a great place to live. Don't you speak Brazilian? We don't drink tea with our pinkies up. Well then I don't want any of your country then. What, like dipping your pinky in the tea and then licking it? It's not clear where that misconception came from, but I did notice when watching a video about medieval feasts that it was common to eat with pinkies raised. The reason for that was because the salt and pepper would be in open pots on the table that anyone could take from, and you'd scoop some up with your clean pinky and sprinkle onto your food. I do. Well, not always. Egypt isn't only a desert with dudes on camels. Cairo has the craziest traffic I've ever seen. And I've traveled the world. That Kenya is not full of uneducated starving children. And neither is Africa as a whole. Every country has their less privileged demographics, but the stereotypes of African countries both enrage me and break my heart. It's Reddit, so you're powerless against the users who thinks they knows more about your country than you do. This one is actually very easily explained. Due to a variety of factors, Africa as a whole has seen a massive reduction in poverty over the last 40 years. It's not weird that people think of Africa as poor when 40 years ago over 50% of the population were living below the poverty line. But between 1980 and 1990 that trend started to improve and more of the African population started to move to the other side of the line. So while it might not be true anymore, it used to be, and people just need to adjust their worldview. On a side note, comparatively Africa is the poorest place in the world. With 53% of all the people in the world living below the poverty line is on the African continent in 2015, and while Africa as a whole is improving, it is not at the same rate as the rest of the world. Which means that even though poverty in Africa is declining, by 2030 Africa will account for 90% of all the poverty in the world. Latin American here, and I feel you, bro. The thing about third world isn't poverty by itself. It is inequality. Think about it this way. There are countries in Africa that have, quite literally, starving uneducated children which make up the majority of the population. Scotland is one of the most beautiful countries on earth and has over 900 islands. I remember driving through Scotland when I was touring with a band and kept thinking, this is why fairy tales are illustrated the way they are. I didn't get to stay long, but I think Scotland is magically beautiful, and it is so green. The hills, cliffs, the little towns, are all so picturesque. The only city I saw was Edinburgh, but I thought it was gorgeous as well. On a side note, the bar venue was super fun as well and gave us by far the best accommodations the entire tour. 10/10ths would come back to visit. Scotland is really beautiful. I visited in my childhood. I still look up pictures of Scotland and I'm mesmerized by its beauty. The whole of the UK is, in my opinion. People always feel the need to spend thousands each year, go abroad numerous times, but they haven't visited the Highlands, the North Coast, Ireland, the Lake District, the South Coast of England, etc. There is a lot of beauty on these islands. Northern Scotland is my favourite. The NC 500 route is something else. Germany isn't as advanced as everyone thinks it. Our data coverage is crap. You have slow internet everywhere and can't pay without cash in most locations. Bus tickets are expensive and everything has to be printed and faxed. They almost never accept emails. Why? I don't make the rules.
that not all Australians like Vegemite. This man right here straight lying. Source, also Australian. Un-Australian. Anyone who denounces Vegemite should be deported. Some prefer Marmite. It's a surprise that some Australians do, like if you know an Australian that does, can you ask them why? Like why do any Australians like Vegemite? It tastes horrible. That Bavaria is only a small part of our country way in the south, and their traditions are pretty unique to this part. This typical image of Lederhosen, Oktoberfest and mountains has nothing to do with the rest of us. You know how people will assume the US is kind of mostly like Texas? Bavaria seems to be your Texas. Although in a strange coincidence, a lot of Texans were from Bavaria. Herrlich. Wunderbar. I used to live in Vienna, and as much as every Austrian here will hate me for saying this, Bavaria seems way more similar to Austria than the rest of Germany. Bavaria is the best part though. Traveled to Germany a lot for work, and I always love to be in the southeast. I do like the other areas too. Germany is slowly becoming one of my favorite countries, I think. A few lessons about the Middle East, Levantine and Northwest Asia. Not everyone is Arab. Not everyone is Muslim. It's not all desert. The northern part is especially mountainous. It snows in the Middle East. Not everyone is dark-featured. Yes, colored eyes and fair skin. Hair exist in the Middle East. Peace. Flying back from Zurich to Singapore last year, it was quite a shock to look out the window flying over Iran and see a whole lot of mountains covered in snow. Looking at Wikipedia though, seems to be heaps of mountains there that are way bigger than the tallest here in Australia. We are not socialists. Best regards, Nordics. But you pay for other people's healthcare. That's socialism. I think there ought to be a distinction between the garden variety socialism that we've seen throughout history and the democratic socialism that is more popular nowadays. One seems to work better than the other. Not all Indians are poor. Not all Indians live in slums. In fact, very less do. I've seen that channels like Vox etc. only show the poor side of my country. They'll never show the urban area, tall skyscrapers, malls, gardens or posh localities. Also, not all Indians are good at maths and science. Also, very few Indians are vegan. 35% of the 1.3 billion people are vegetarian. How many Indians work at call centers? I always had a disbelief in the way the media portrays India, especially the BBC. They're just nursing their wounds from the caste movement. A cousin of mine went to India for a wedding and came back with photographs in front of the World One Tower, the Namaste Tower, and the 360 West buildings. And boy, Mumbai looks like something out of the future. Mumbai is also a much more fitting name for that city. My Indian friend told me that even in the slums their kitchen, cooking area, is spotlessly clean. People living in slums in big cities are not poor. They have lots of job opportunities. Actual poor people stay in villages doing subsistence farming. For tourists in Australia to start treating drop bears seriously. There are way too many casualties each year from people leaving their guard down in the bushland. Education is vital to the tourists. Those little dogs are vicious. It's so sad. The tourists really need to put Vegemite behind their ears in drop bear territory. Second that. Source, I'm Australian with drop bear injury. Not all Indians speak Hindi, only around 25% of the population have Hindi as its native language, and only around 45% of the population can actually speak in Hindi. And Bollywood is not the only film industry in India. Also, a lot more Indians speak really good English than the rest of the world thinks. Talk about hundreds of languages spoken in India. And all Indians don't have the accent which is shown in Hollywood movies. Many of us speak English clear and better than the Native Americans and the Britishers.